Hey everyone, welcome back to NeurosciQ. Today we are joined by Professor Steve Joordens from the University of Toronto Scarborough campus. He actually taught me intro psych 5 years ago, and I'm excited to have him today. Welcome to the channel, Professor Joordens. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Great to be here with you.
I've actually had you on the list of people to invite to the channel for some time. I was just waiting for the right moment. And then when I saw that you were awarded with the Minister of College and Universities Award of Excellence for your contributions during the pandemic, I thought it would be a great time. So just to
Very
let our
cool.
viewers know, Professor Joordens is offering a course on Coursera called Mind Control, Managing Your Mental Health During COVID-19, which, by the way, has over 135,000 students enrolled and a 4.8 star rating. So congrats for that.
Thank you. Thank you. It feels good. I mean, I think it is one of the things I say in the course is one of the ways we can all feel better during this is to find some way to contribute if we can, something positive we can do either on a personal level or on, in this case, a global level. But it is very cool and very heartening to see so many people take the course and say so many nice things about it. So it's very cool.
Yeah, exactly. I really enjoyed the course. It was fun. Um, and I want to take the opportunity to kind of touch on some of the stuff you say in the course today. And then I know you do a lot of work with education and
Yep.
online education. So if we could talk about that as well.
Cool.
All right. So with COVID-19, obviously, this is something novel for all of us, and we're taking it one day at a time. But
Yep.
what is something about this? Why is it so stressful from a psychological perspective?
Yeah, I mean, right from the beginning, right from March on, it's like suddenly we could not predict what would happen the following day, and our brain, is continually predicting the future, and just even when we, like I say, open a door to our house, as we kind of reach to open that door, our brain expects certain things to be on the other side, and when those things are, we have a sort of feeling of security because it's kind of like, yeah, the world is the way we know it to be, and that gives us a sense of control and a sense of comfort. Again, since March, that's just been pulled out from under us, and maybe though now more recently we have a little bit of a sense with the vaccines and stuff. We can start to think, okay, there is an end in sight. We know it's going to be a tough road to get from here to there. But maybe we have more certainty now than we ever did, but we still have a ton of uncertainty. And when you mix the virus things with people who may not have jobs and all the uncertainty that the virus has caused in the economic sector, we have a lot of people with a lot of anxiety right now.
Yeah. So I know a little stress is good, but at times like this, there's too much stress. But for our viewers, I'm just referring to the Yerkes-Dodson law that there's like an optimal amount of stress that can help us out, but we perform worse. So there's also general adaptation syndrome. That's another stress curve. But
Yeah.
where on this curve would you say many of us probably fall right now?
Yeah, I mean, the real worry, I mean, we talk about, the system that has evolved for us to deal with stress and anxiety is meant to deal with, what we call acute stressors. So the bear that pops out of the woods and we either fight that bear or we flee from the bear. Either way, we're either dead or a half an hour later it's over and, we're get back to our normal, more relaxed state. We have a bear that just ain't moving. It's there all the time. We stare at it every time we look at the news. And so that's creating this chronic level of anxiety. And that's where that general adaptation syndrome kind of comes in. That if this system stays active for too long, we get too much cortisol in our bodies, it starts having all sorts of negative effects on our ability to concentrate, on things like weight gain, but also really concerningly on the effectiveness of our immune system. Our immune system becomes negatively impacted after a while of chronic stress. And obviously in a situation where a virus is floating around, we can't have that. And so it's really important. And that's really why I created the course, I think, is that people learn some techniques to find a way to manage it, if only to have a break from it from a period of time, However, not all breaks are created equal. There are some breaks that actually sort of counter the stress response. And so part of the course involves people kind of becoming more mindful of how their interactions with the environment affect their mental state, and kind of seeking out the medicine, so to speak, those things that actually are helpful at this time, and then kind of using them like medicine, realizing they have value and leaning on that value a little bit as we try to get through these dark winter months.
Yeah, especially now in the winter. I know the mindfulness, the guided meditation that you do in the course. I was actually listening to some other tracks on Spotify that help with that,
Yep.
and
Yep.
I felt like I've been hypnotized before. It happened to me at Frage, but when I was doing the guided meditation, it kind of felt similar to that
Yeah.
state of hypnosis. So, is there like some sort of power of suggestion that comes into play with guided meditation, do you think?
I mean, it can be. You're right. The induction process is very similar, because often that state of mind, when you get very, very relaxed, that can allow for vivid imagery. And yes, a hypnotist can use that in a variety of ways. And a stage hypnotist is very different than a clinical hypnotist. We could talk about some of those. But what we're using it for, I almost use more the Star Trek analogy to kind of help people think about it. The teleporter. Remember, I used to go into one of these things, and they would just put in some coordinates, and it would just beam the person somewhere else. Our mind can kind of do that. We can beam our mind and our body to a different state. But the unique kind of thing is we have to know that state well. We have to be really intimate with it. And when we're really familiar with what it feels like, then we can put ourselves there. And so relaxation is the opposite of anxiety. And the best way to escape it is to focus on the opposite. And so people can learn to kind of summon this relaxed state. But again, before you can get there, you have to get to know it. So one of my recommendations early on is, search guided relaxation. You'll find all of these audio tracks, and they are a person that just kind of walk you through a process that will ultimately leave you feeling really relaxed. And just to demystify that a little bit, it's things like starting at your feet and working up, just clenching muscle groups until they really kind of hurt, but then releasing them and feeling what it feels like when you release the tension and when relaxation takes over. And you might associate that even with a trigger word, my favorite being beach, but it could be whatever works for you. But the idea is you're kind of training your mind. Oh, that's what relaxation feels like. And you can use the trigger word in sort of a Pavlovian condition way as a cue you can use in the future to bring that state back. And so and plus it's a great thing to do before bed, because it prepares your body and mind for sleep. If you do that, if you get to know it, and if you do that with enough frequency, then eventually when you start feeling the anxiety raise, which is another thing you have to become mindful about, by the way, we sometimes don't realize how anxious we are, but when we can realize that, and then we can summon the relaxation, that's a way of directly countering it and sort of having control. Before COVID, I called this the psychology of being cool, because it literally is, when people are getting angry or whatever, if you know that person who doesn't get emotionally caught up and who's able to stay relaxed and think about the arguments and respond in a non-emotional way, those are the people we call cool. And that's sort of what you can do with this relaxation training, is teach yourself how to stay cool and be cool.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you don't even realize you're stressed, and then you'll just flip out, and then you're like, oh, what was bothering me?
So by the way, that is now more and more. I didn't highlight this in the course, but as I talk about it more and more, I highlight how critical that step is. And I sometimes talk about the potential of using a buddy. If you're going to learn how to manage your stress, and I suggest that's a silver lining for us all now. Mental health is not something somebody else has an issue with. We are all anxious. And so this is a great chance for us to kind of figure out what is anxiety and how can I go about managing it. And one of the first steps is just recognizing it. And so if you take this journey with a friend or a family member or somebody else, and if you promise early on, I will tell you when you're stressed, and you tell me when I'm stressed, and we won't rip each other's head off when we do it, because that'll be the natural reaction, by the way. If someone says, you look stressed, you'll say, no, I'm not stressed, blah, blah, blah. But hopefully just that fight reflex which is what you're showing, will tell you, oh, maybe I am, because I came right back at that person hard. And so then if you kind of look at your body or kind of attend to your body, and you say, oh yeah, That's what stress feels like. I feel it right now, and it's a tingly kind of feeling. It's oxygenated blood going to all of our muscles. It's just a physical reaction. But when we get good at detecting it, then we can kick in some of our techniques where we can control it. But if you don't even realize that you're stressed out, then you're losing the opportunity to control it at that point.
Yeah. And you talk about buddies, so I just want to bring this over to the education system, because a lot of kids, like, they made the decision to go back to school, and it's kind of a blended learning. I have a younger brother in high school, so he goes every other day in school and then online. But there's statistics showing that the youth are actually more likely to report worsening mental health. But how do you think, like, the impact of...
Yeah, it's a hard time for youth, and that would include you, I think. So when I think of youth, when I think of it psychologically, I think of this age where a kid starts sort of cognitively leaving their parents. So they start thinking of themselves as an independent person who will one day leave the household. So it's not all about the parents. Friends start to become very, very important. And from that period right up to when they kind of settle down with their permanent life partner, during that interval, it's all about social connections and building social connections and meeting friends and meeting people who might be those potential life partners. And so this is a period of time for, if we say 15 to 25-year-olds, just to put a rough band on it, when it's all about their social network, and suddenly they're being told, you can't socialize. You have to stay home and you have to, etc. Of all of the groups, that is the most difficult for them. It is where their mind is at. And so a lot of them are struggling. They're feeling lonely. They're not finding good ways to substitute for what was easy when you just went to school and you had these friends around. The context kind of created the social interactions for you. And now in a post-COVID world, or at least when the kids aren't going to school, they have to try to find ways of doing that, and more intentionally kind of connecting with their friends. I sometimes recommend to people, young people your age, you watch Stranger Things, and one of the things you saw in Stranger Things from the 80s was these kids talking on telephones for hours sitting there on a bed talking on a telephone, which is what we did in the 80s before the internet. And I think there's a certain mojo to that, that people should rediscover a little bit, that you can, talk to your friend, and you don't need a Zoom, you don't, just chill out somewhere with a phone and talk to your friends a little bit, and maybe learn that as a way of replacing some of the social interactions you're not getting otherwise.
Yeah, it's a lot more enriching to hear somebody's voice rather than reading, because you get like the tone,
Well, let me mention a couple of things about the phone just to make you appreciate it versus the other thing. With social media interactions or even Zoom things, you've got a distraction device sitting right in front of you, right? And so maybe you're plugged in like we are right now, but it's very easy sometimes to just get pulled over here or pulled over there, and now you're just half listening. And when you're half listening, the person knows you're half listening. You're not grunting at the right times. You're not snickering at the right times. All these nonverbal kind of things that you do in response to what they're doing, that's what tells that other person, hey, they're paying attention to me. They're listening. And that's what tells them that you care. And so what I like about the phone is when you pick it up, you tend to pay attention to it. It's just there. And so suddenly we attend better and we react better with our nonverbals, and the message is clear. It's just what we're saying and how we're saying it. And of those two things, what we're saying is probably the least relevant. So, I often suggest to people, pick a TV show and agree that you'll both watch it. And then after that show airs, just call each other and talk about the TV show. And, it doesn't matter. It's more that you're connecting and that you're listening to each other and sort of strengthening that feeling like, oh yeah, I have other people who are there and that care. And that's the important part.
Yeah, that's really important. Yeah. I know even with teachers now too, teaching kids through Zoom, and none of them are going to turn on their camera, so you just feel like you're talking to a blank screen. So
it is kind of funny, by the way. So when I do educational technologies, my big educational technology is something called PeerScholar, and it's all about teaching those sort of human skills, the ability to communicate well with other people, to think critically on the fly, to think creatively on the fly. And, when I do these Zoom things, yeah, I've given my students a hard time, not a hard time, but yeah, they come up with all these little heads, and no video. And I tell them that, these sorts of interactions, the kind that we're having, they're how people interview sometimes nowadays. And a lot of important stuff happens this way now. And students should be seeing all of this. A good student would see all this as an opportunity to practice that. And so, sometimes when I'm talking to my students, I'm saying, why aren't you turning the video on? They're like, oh, you don't want to see me this morning, sir, or I don't want to put my hijab on. I don't. And my response to them is, no, you should. You should. If you don't look good, look good. To do yourself up a little bit, get out there and see this as an opportunity to interact with other people in an attentive way, and in a sort of group collaborative way. And it's a really good opportunity to practice. So you don't want your first experience with this kind of interaction being that interview. You would like that to be your 40th or 50th experience. And all of these office hours, if you're a university student, or if you're in K-12 itself, the classes, they're opportunities. So I would suggest to people, turn your camera on. You only have it off because you want to be distracted. And you don't want people to catch you being distracted, but you shouldn't want to be distracted. So turning it on could be one of the ways you help keep yourself focused on the task at hand.
Yeah, it keeps you accountable because you feel like, oh, somebody might see me if I look at my phone. But also, yeah, if you have to get ready in the morning, that's just like, it makes your day more structured. Like, you have to actually get up and put clothes on. You're not just rolling out of bed.
100%. And that's one of the, when we talk about managing stress, we sometimes get into all these like relaxation therapy and all this stuff, which is great. But often the basics are the most important of all. And they include eating well, good nutritious food, sleeping well. I'll come back to that in a moment. Aerobic activity, getting some exercise in, getting your heart rate up for 20 minutes or more, at least 3 times a week, really good for positive emotional state. And with respect to sleeping, if we kind of come back to sleeping, the core thing to give you a good night's sleep is that you wake up at the same time in the morning and you go to bed at the same time every night. And if you do that, your circadian rhythms get aligned, and you're tired when you go to bed and you're alert when you wake up. And so the best overall sense then is just what you said, at least for 5 days a week, give yourself a structure and stick to that structure. Treat it like a work day and get up. And if you showered every day, shower, get dressed, do what you do. And then schedule things into that workday. Like we talked about, reaching out to friends now and then. That might be something you schedule into your workday. Other activities that kind of bring your mind away from COVID. These are different for different people, but here's my favorite: karaoke. Especially if you can convince your family to do it. Most of our smart TVs have karaoke built in. And if you could have a family activity that on Wednesday nights, we're going to each do this and sing 3 or 4 songs each, what you'll find is it'll be funny. Some people can't sing very well, and that's okay, but you'll laugh at them, or they'll laugh at you, and that's all right. But the idea of singing and laughing, those things release positive endorphins, and they really counter the cortisol reaction. So kind of putting those in every now and then is medicine, and it really does make you feel a lot better to kind of have that time. And we it's a time to reconnect with our families, which isn't always the natural thing for young people. Like when they're 16, 17, it's kind of like they're pulling away from their families and pulling towards their friends. But this might be a time to realize the value family gives us, and to reconnect a little bit there too.
Yeah, the last Wednesday we did it with my family. We called it Wellness Wednesday. And we were all just jamming out because everyone plays instruments in my house. And my sister's like, let's put it on Facebook. So we had a lot of positive responses to just being able to share it with people.
So you're making other people feel better through your music. So those are the things we have to really hang on to. Like, we all know we have a dark winter ahead. But we have to find these things to kind of allow us to go through. So that's a fantastic one. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Now, just back to structure, I read the other article that you helped out on, and you talked a bit about how commutes were actually helpful because it helped get us into mindset and get us into our work self from our home self. So how can we fake commutes at home?
Yeah. My commute now is up a set of stairs into a room. Yeah, no, but we should, and it's not even just commutes, but also, like, if you think of a student schedule, they often have a class, but then they have a break between the class. So often our days are punctuated by these little transition periods. And I think it is good to have those transition periods. So yeah, certainly when you're having breakfast, I mean, it may just be coming up to coming up to the room, but it could also be taking a walk around the block. Like, if you walk to a bus stop before, I mean, it's not fun in the winter to put on all the gear, but it's always great when you're out there. Like, it feels nice. And so if you just sort of walk a block back to your house and then go up to your room, that's your commute. But also in between things, in between events, to go downstairs and maybe make yourself a cup of tea or something, and come up, but to give your head a little bit of a chance to refresh between these, because that's, I mean, this is one of the ones I'm guilty of. I have to say, I don't do this as well as I preach it. So what I do is what so many people do, which is Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting, and you literally hang up on one, start another one, and your head has to go totally somewhere else. And by the end of the day, you just feel like you don't know what happened. It was like a blur of a day. And so that's where that punctuation kind of allows us to breathe and consolidate what we were just talking about before we move on to something new.
Yeah, otherwise it all just blends into one another. And
It does. And that structure, I mean, the other thing I talk about to kind of give people something to think about with that structure is, we know from psychology that dog owners tend to be just happier and more emotionally balanced than non-dog owners, and we know they become more happy when they get a dog too, if you do a pre-post. And when we try to figure out why, there's a number of reasons. I mean, dogs give that unconditional love and all that kind of stuff, which is very good, but they also insist on a schedule. Dogs want to be walked at the specific time every day. They want to be fed at a specific time. They get their treat at specific times. It's amazing how synchronized a dog's mind is. And they push the owners to match. And so literally they're looking at you when it's time for a walk. And so you go out and give them the walk. And these dog owners have a lot of structure in their life. And it seems, if you mix that aerobic activity of walking with the structure, those seem to be the two biggest things that are important to them. And so we can all, with or without a dog, we can all take those lessons and use them.
yeah, I notice a lot of people that I know have been getting dogs during this time. Just, I think, kids are home, so they're like, now's my chance to be there and train it.
Yeah, which isn't bad, because that's where a lot of dog ownership problems begin. Somebody gets a dog and they don't have the time to train it well, and then they have issues that they have to live with or eventually train out of them. But if you do it right from the beginning, you can have a fantastic relationship.
Yeah. All right. Finally, I just want to go into like your peer scholar, and I know you have Cognito for the younger kids too as well. And then I heard that you were thinking of doing Peeraboo for even younger kids. But how does Peer Scholar work in getting like social pressures to influence students to learn?
Yeah, it's not even so much social pressures, although we think of peer pressure, I guess, is where the term came from, but it's kind of using peers in different ways. I guess it's there. But here's the idea, just to give everyone a sense. You're probably used to, say, writing an essay and then sending it to the prof, and eventually you get a mark and some comments back. With Peer Scholar, you write the essay, but that's step one of 3 steps. So you submit it. Then in step 2, you actually see some of the essays that your peers wrote, 5 or 6 of them typically, and we ask you to be the teacher. We want you to go through each of these and analyze it. So the real idea of Peer Scholar is we're giving you structured practice, thinking critically, thinking creatively, communicating, both like shutting up and listening, which is what we call receptive communication, which is a very important skill. We all know people who don't have that skill. They just don't listen when we talk to them. Frustrates us. So learning to listen well, but also learning to obviously represent yourself well expressively as well. And so as students go through and have to analyze each peer work, we're asking them to do things like that, to give constructive criticism, to give positive feedback about things the students are doing well. And so they're getting all this practice with these skills. And these are the skills that define the success of your life. At a job situation, if you can think critically and creatively, you're going to do better. But I also always like to say, eventually you're going to pick a life partner. And if your critical thinking is good, you'll pick well, and that'll make a big difference in your life. If you don't pick well, it'll make a big difference the other way. So these are skills for life, and what Peer Scholar is all about is really formalizing the practice. It's kind of like basketball training camp except for the mind. Let me just mention the third step, by the way. After students have given their peers a bunch of advice, in the third step, they receive the advice peers have given them. So about 5 peers have given them advice, and we give them a chance to take any of that advice and fix their work before the prof sees it. And so ultimately, if they listen to the advice well, and we structure that as well, we have them analyze all the feedback, and then ultimately use the good feedback to improve their work and submit it. And so in there, they're learning how to learn from feedback, which is something we are not good at. Feedback, just like the virus, is like a threat, an attack, and we want to fight it or we want to flee it. But if we can learn to do neither, and to listen and think and grow, that's what separates what we call a coachable person from a non-coachable person. And when managers see that you're coachable, then they think, oh, we have this new job coming up, and maybe she doesn't have the skills right now, but wow, she can learn and grow and listen, and I'm sure she would grow into that job for sure. We should give her a chance. And so that's the skill we're trying to teach in that third phase, is how to effectively learn from feedback. And yeah, we're doing this mostly at the university level, but as you say, we're trying to get in the K-12, and we're trying to get out even all the way down, because I kind of say, imagine you trained people that play basketball when they're 19. Well, that's great. They'll probably be pretty good, but we'd rather train them when they're 12 or 10. That's when we can have the most bang for the buck. And in fact, even with kids, I throw this out to parents, that parents will sometimes say, well, when can my child start practicing that kind of thing? And I say, when they learn that word why, because every parent knows that the child will start turning that word on them. Like, we're going to Grammys this Sunday. Why? Oh, because she hasn't seen you for a while. Why? Well, I guess we've been busy and we haven't. And the parent's like, why am I justifying everything, right? But the kid is saying, justify, explain it to me. So at that age, I recommend to parents, you can already start turning it on the kid. You can say, hey, would you like a cookie? And they say, sure. Would you like peanut butter or chocolate chip? Chocolate chip. Why? So start turning that word why on them and give them decisions, let them choose, and then ask them to justify the choice they made. And that's going to be prompting them to try to form some conscious thinking, which is critical thought, communicating, expressing themselves. So right from that age, which I think is about 2.5 or something,
Yeah.
you can start pushing your child to do that. And PeerScholar just takes that to another level.
Yeah, it's definitely a better way of thinking, rather than, I know we always box people in now. Like, we're giving external motivation, but if we get people to think critically and we can shift them to internal motivation, I think it would definitely help with learning.
And that's one of the so one of the heartening things with PeerScholar is we're asking students to do a lot of work to go through and assess the work of their peers. And when we first started using it, we were worried that students were going to say, this is too much work, and not see the value of it. But what we're not seeing, that students actually quite appreciate it, and the big powerful thing for them, kind of that shift of extrinsic to intrinsic you're talking about, is when they start seeing what their peers do. Usually you never see, right? You have no idea what anybody else is doing. You only know your own work. And when you start seeing what your peers are doing, you want to be better. You get a sense of where your work fits, and you see that some of your peers are doing better work than you, and you get to see their work. So you get a sense of what it is they're doing that's better. And it does raise that sort of competitive instinct in us where we want to be better. Next time we do a peer assessment thing, we want ours to be one of the good ones. And so it does become a little less about grades per se, and a little more about, I want to represent myself well, because I know other students are going to see my work as well. And so I think, just as you suggested, that shift from, there's a book from the 60s called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Maybe it's the 70s, but the prof hates grades. He hates marks, and he's trying to come up with a way of doing things that is not grade based. And a lot of us feel that way. Grades are the bane of a good education sometimes, it seems. And so, yeah, this is a way of trying to leverage some of those other motivations.
But also, yeah, like you were saying before, at that age, the peer-to-peer relationship is more important than kind of, I guess, the peer-to-teacher. So if people get to see from their classmates and their peers, they feel the need to improve as well.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, I should mention that usually a lot of the assessments are done anonymously within peer assessment, so you don't know who. But it doesn't seem to matter that people don't know it's yours per se. They're still seeing yours and reacting.
Yeah, exactly. And you see their reaction after too, right? You get the feedback.
Absolutely. Yep. And you get feedback on your feedback too. So when you give feedback to 5 or 6 people, they will rate your feedback, and you will eventually see. And so, for example, one of the things we ask them to do is to indicate the emotions they felt when they read your feedback. And, sometimes those emotions are things like angry, frustrated, confused. And that kind of tells you, oh, that wasn't what I was trying to do. I
Yeah.
should look at the way I worded that again. So we're trying to work on a little bit of that human interaction skill, what some people call emotional intelligence. But just this idea of how do I effectively ask somebody to change their behavior, but in a way that doesn't make them angry. And it turns out that's a very difficult thing to do. But it's a really important skill too. Every manager has to know that skill.
Yeah. I
So it's
think
sort of
it's
the flip
difficult
side.
to do in writing too. When you write something, sometimes it comes out more harsh. But
Yep.
we're all learning how to deal with that now.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Anyway, thank you for joining us today, and thank
No
you to
problem.
everyone that watched. If anyone watching has any questions, leave them down below, and I'll make sure to get back to you. If you have any interest in Steve's course, check it out on Coursera. It will be in the description. Also, the article I mentioned that he was featured on will be in the description as well. But that's all for today. Make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't done so, and I'll see you next Saturday. Thanks for joining us, Steve.
Thank you. Have a good one.